So far we've created a pretty useful to-do list, apart from one problem is that we can't create our own custom to-dos. We only have this new to-do. And to make our own to-dos, we're gonna need a form. Now Meteor doesn't have its own form handling solution, but there are several packages out there that will help us with that. But first I want to show you how you could do it without a package, because for a simple project like this to-do list, we wouldn't necessarily want to install a package. So let's take a look at how we would do that. Now, the first thing we want to do is create our form. So let's go, and we're going to put it at the top of our to-do list. So actually, let's remove this add to-do button and create a form. And we're simply going to have one input for the to-do name. So input type text, name is going to be label. And I'm going to go ahead and give this an ID of to-do form, and that'll help us when we create the template event handler. So basically we need an input, and we're actually going to submit the form when we hit enter, so I'm not going to add a submit button. And let's have a look at that. So there's the input, and of course if I type in something now, hit enter, nothing happens. Well, refresh the page because the form is automatically submitted, as you can see in the URL. But now let's go ahead and add the event handler that will take care of this. So let's go to our hello world.js, and since this is in the to-do list template, I'm going to add it here, and I'm going to add a submit event for our form that has an ID of to-do form. I think, yes, to-do form, and that's a function. And now we want to use the first parameter, which is event. So that will pass in the event, which is the form submission event. And first thing we want to do is prevent the normal event handler, because as we saw when I hit enter, it submitted the form and brought us to the URL with the form query. So we want to prevent that. So what we do is event dot prevent default, and that'll stop it from submitting the form. Now we want to get the data from the form, so let's create an object. Let's see, var to do is going to be an object, and basically we only need the label, so we have the label property. And to get the value of our input, we're going to use jQuery, and we're going to use event.target. So that will select the DOM object that was the target of our event, so in this case the form, and inside of that we need to find the input with the name of label. Whoops, sorry. Name label. And so I could, this is just going to look for anything with name equals label attribute, and since we only have one input with that, that's fine. And then .val to get the value. And that's it. This will create an object with the label set to the label I've entered. And now we just need to create a new to-do. So I'm going to cut this out of here and actually remove this event because we won't have the to-do button anymore. And I'm going to add it here. Oops. Sorry, I accidentally cut instead of pasted. Okay, there we go. So here, and instead of that, let's take this created at and add it in here. And then to-dos, we're going to insert our to-do. And that should do it. Let's give it a test. Wait for Meteor to refresh. And let's try form to do. And yes, it works. although it would be good if the form was reset after we submit it. So let's quickly add that. And to do that, we simply need to do, again, event.target. And here we need to add 0 because event.target is actually an array of matched DOM objects. So even though we only have one, it's still an array. So we take the first one and let's call reset on it, and that should do it. So let me just wait for Meteor to refresh and try a new to-do. And when I hit enter, yes, we can see that the form was reset. So that's basically it for simple form handling. We just basically create an event handler for the form submission event, and we get the values using jQuery. Now this is okay for simple forms and if you have maybe a couple of forms in your app, but if you're doing more than that, there are much better solutions that require a lot less code, and we're going to take a look at that now by adding a package. And the most popular Meteor package for form handling is called AutoForm. So let's have a look at it on Atmosphere JS. So you can go ahead and search for AutoForm, and we can see it here. And AutoForm has really extensive documentation, so you can take a look at that. But I'm just going to show you how to create a basic form with it. So let's go ahead and add it to our project by copy pasting the package name into our packages file. And let's have a look at the console when Meteor installs it. And we can see that it actually installed 3 different packages. The first one being AutoForm. The second is called Simple Schema. And the third is Moment from Moment.js. Now, Simple Schema is a sort of companion package to AutoForm, but it can also be used by itself. And it's designed to let you create schemas for your collections. So you can define what the documents should look like, what kind of fields they'll have, and what each field will contain. And it's useful for security and to make sure that the documents match your expectations. And Moment is a JavaScript library for working with dates and times. And actually, we're going to add one more package from the same author called collection2. And that allows us to take the schemas we define and attach them to our collections so that inserts and updates are automatically validated against our collection. And we'll see in a second what all of this does and means. But let's start by replacing our form here with a quick form. And that's one of the ways you can create forms with AutoForm is using the quick form template. So you just include the quick form template, and then it needs a few things, the first of which is an ID. So let's give it an ID of to-do form. And next, we should give it a collection so it knows which collection it's working with. In this case, it's the to-dos collection. And then this is going to be an insert form for creating new to-dos. So we give it a type of insert. And if we have a look at our site now, you can see that we get an error, and that's because the schema has not been defined. So we need to give our collection a schema before we can use AutoForm with it. So let's go ahead and create a schema. And a schema is basically an object with definitions of fields in it. And to create it, let's do to-do schema is equal to new simple schema. And then we pass that an object in which we define our schema. Now we only have 2 fields, so let's go ahead and define them. Label, and every field needs a type. So in this case, it's a string. Our label is just a string. And let's go ahead and give it a max value, and that will limit how long of a string we can input. Let's say 200, so that people can't write a whole essay as a to-do. And then we need the created at, which has a type of date. And that should do it. Now, one last thing we need to do is actually attach our schema to our to-dos collection. And thanks to collection2, the package, we can just do our collection name, so to-dos, attach schema, and then we pass the schema, so to-dos schema. And now it should work. Let's have a look. And a couple of things to notice here. The first is that Autoform is using the Bootstrap template. We can see it's styled the inputs and buttons as it would with Bootstrap. And that's because Autoform has these themes, and by default it uses the Bootstrap theme. So if you're not using Bootstrap in your project, you can check out the documentation. They have a list of available themes here. And then there's all sorts of other add-on packages for Autoform. And the second thing to notice is that it's actually added this created at input. And we don't really want that because we want the created at date to be set automatically to the current date and time. But let's just go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to go new to do Autoform and set the current date and submit. And we can see it works, but it actually added 2 to-dos. And the reason for that is that we didn't remove our old form submission handler, and that's creating its own to-do. So let's get rid of that. Go back and try again. Let's see. And now it's working just fine, just adding 1. Let's remove these. And we can see also that Autoform automatically clears the form for us, which is nice. So let's fix this created at issue. We want to remove that from our form so that it's not an input. And we can use this omit fields attribute and give it the name of the fields we want to omit. So in this case, created at. And if you had multiple fields, you could separate them by commas or pass it just a JavaScript array of strings instead of a string. And let's have a look. That should remove the created at input. It does, but now the problem is if I try creating a new to-do, it's, oops, wrong button. It's not working because now the created at attribute is not being set, and it's required by the schema. So to fix that, we can do default value and simply give it a new date. And now it should work again. Let's try this. Yes, our new to-do was added. So now we have our form created with Autoform instead of a custom form and event handler. And it's actually a lot less code because basically we just use this quick form template and create a schema. And on top of that, we get the added bonus of security. So now people can't insert random things into the database. And we can try this out. Let's say I set the max to-do label length to 10, and I try write something longer than 10. It's not going to let me do that. See, it actually blocks the input. And if I inspect that, I can see that the input has been giving a max length property of 10. So the input won't accept more than 10 characters. And let's try submitting our form with an empty input. We can see that Autoform actually shows us error messages as well, which is really great. Saves us a lot of work. Now let me show you one last way to create forms, which is also using Autoform. And this lets you create a bit more customized forms, so you define the inputs yourselves. So if you wanted to add some structure or something to it, you could do that. And to do that, we create an Autoform template this way. So open Autoform and Autoform. And oops, yes, here we need to put a hash, not the greater than sign. And then if we take a look at this, I'm just going to remove the omit fields attribute because it doesn't apply in this case. Let's take a look. I actually have an error. Oh, I misspelled Autoform. There we go. And take a look at that. Actually, there is no more form because we haven't defined any inputs. And to define inputs, we add input templates. And those are called AF quick field, so auto form quick field, and then we need to give it an attribute of name. In this case, let's add the label field, and then we just close that. Now we should have the label field. And let's try adding a new to-do. So new to-do 3, and it works. And actually in this case, we don't have the submit button because we didn't add a submit button. And since that's actually the way we originally designed our form, I think it works out nicely. So that's basically it for the basics of form handling. We'll have a look in future videos at more advanced stuff, more complicated forms and custom form handling using AutoForm. But for now, we have our to-do list that's functional, and next video we're going to be taking a look at publications and subscriptions.